Well, she'll be able to.
You'll be able to.
Do you want to turn that towards? Yeah, I'll let you.
Or
know.
you just tell me, and when I do this, can you make sure
we're live?
see?
Are we live? Yeah. We're live.
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
Oh, we're live. This is our first live.
Yeah.
Gail and
Good
Michelle.
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good
afternoon.
Welcome to Quilt Talk with Michelle Burritt. This is Michelle over here, and Miss Gail Cram. And we're winging it. This is our first installation, and you're gonna grow with us as we grow.
Yeah. I think we'll always wing it.
Yeah,
we're wingers.
So before we get started, I was thinking maybe we could just have Michelle and Gail tell us a little bit about themselves. Michelle, do you want to go ahead and start?
I have been living in Reno all my life, except for the first 3 years. I started sewing when I was about 7 or 8 years old on my mom's little old Singer. My sister and I made Barbie clothes, and I took every sewing class I could ever find in any school, in school when they used to have home economics and stuff. So I took all those sewing classes that I could. And then any quilt, I've went to any classes I could take. I watch YouTube a lot. I look at any tips and tricks. I take beginner classes as much as I can because you always learn something. So.
And you are a local long armor?
Yes, I do long arm quilting as a business. So I see a lot of quilts that come in. That was what the basis for today was. But we want to know about Gail.
But just how many quilts do you think you do a year?
I don't know, maybe 400 or 500.
That's a lot of quilts.
That is a lot.
That's a lot.
4
I
or
squeeze
5.
my quilts in. Yeah,
wow.
I do a lot. Right
Okay.
now, you got to get them in for Christmas, though.
Yes. And do you have a favorite type of quilting? I mean, if you're here in Reno and you want to be inspired, go to Michelle's studio because she does it all, and she does it all so well. Everything is just gorgeous, and you go, oh my God, I didn't know you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and it's all the best.
It is.
Thank you. There's a lot of errors in there, which I will never point out. That's your very first tip. Do not point out your errors because nobody will see them.
And that's what we all do. And we also have joining us today Miss Gail Cram, another local legend.
A local legend, yeah. Okay, 4th generation Northern Nevadan. So my family's been here forever. Like Michelle, I've been sewing since I was 7 with my grandma and stuff. I started quilting in 1977 before my first child was born. That was back in the day before rotary cutters, because the rotary cutter was not invented till 1979.
Oh my God!
And so my first quilt was strip piecing, and I used a T-square and scissors and T-pins to hold it together. What a pain in the rear that was.
Yes, so, I remember that. Yeah.
So I started quilting in 1977. I opened a quilt store in 1988 because our local quilt store was closing, and I panicked. Where was I going to buy fabric? So I had a quilt store till 1995, and I'm just a quilter at home. My first quilts were quilted by hand, and then I did on domestic machine, free motion. I'm a free motion quilter. I got my first long arm. It'll be 3 years ago in December, but I just free motion because I'm technically challenged. So
no, free motion takes a lot of skill.
I love it. So, and I quilt for pleasure.
Okay, Gail, how many Yellow Brick Road quilts have you made?
Oh, oh my gosh, that's my go-to. I've probably made about 300.
And how many quilts do you think you've just made, period?
Since 1977. Yes. Oh my gosh, I don't know.
We've got a lot of experience here with these ladies. I think Gail's also judged quilts before.
I have judged quilts and quilt shows.
Yeah.
Not quilts that were getting cash, but
Yeah.
I mean,
So
there
you
are
can tell
so
us
many.
what to look for.
There's a
what
lot
to
of things
do,
that are
the
really
bindings and
right.
all
Bindings,
that.
and borders and squared up blocks are the most important
Mm-hmm.
in a
The basics, the
the
building
basic.
blocks.
Yeah, the building blocks and the most important in the show.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And today we're here. We're going to be discussing borders.
Those wavy
And-
border.
Michelle, she was like, "How do you do your borders?" When I told her, she just kind of shook her head.
I go, no, you can't
Yes!
do that.
Well, long armors. I mean, if you get a quilt in and the borders are wavy, it's not fun.
That fabric has to go somewhere.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're going to talk about that.
Yes. Okay, so I see a lot of border. I see a lot of borders because I see a lot of quilts.
Yes.
So what happens is we get these waves in our borders. And I don't know if you can show. I have a sample
Let me
here
see if I can.
of a nice wavy board. I did press this too. And we can see, and I over exaggerated this, but I have to tell you, I see quilts like this, where the center, and the thing is, if you have a wavy border like this,
Yeah.
some quilts have multiple borders.
And it
I've
gets
seen-
worse as it
Yes,
goes on.
I've seen
It
a
does.
panel, and people take like a 2-inch jelly roll strip and they work border. They're going, oh no, it's just my jelly roll around it. Technically, that's a border. Every single piece of
Strip,
that fabric,
yes.
every strip is a border.
Yes.
So what you want to do is you want to measure. And Jeannie, I believe you have these. These are for bigger quilts. This is 120-inch tape.
Yes.
I know you can get them if you don't have them. I don't remember if you had them.
Well, if you're a long armor, you really need.
Yeah, you
something
need
like
this.
that.
But
Yes.
and if you quilt a lot and you make bigger quilts, because the other tape measures like this, they're
They're
only 60.
Yeah.
Yes, they're just 60
60
inches.
inches.
So that's not a very big quilt. So if you got a big one, you want this thing to go all the way across. You need to measure, and then it has a little, you just push the button, it comes right in. Anyway, enough about that. I use this. So what you want to do to get a really good border, this is just the trick. And this is not, the end all be all. This is the way I do it. This is what I have seen. We are experienced quilters, but we realize there are many ways to do
it.
one
Yes.
thing. So I'm not saying you have to do this and this is going to be it every time. Do what you're comfortable with. If you guys already know how to do it and it works for you, go have at it, because we all know that quilting is, we quilt because we love it. And it's the journey. It's not, bam, get this quilt done.
Right.
Bam, get the next one done. Because if you do that, what happens then?
Oh, you're bored.
You are. You make
It's-
tons of
yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah, you do.
You're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, so what we do, this is what I don't know, a lot of people say this is what you need to do, is you need to measure 3 different spots.
Yes.
So we're going to say this does not have this border on here yet. And we're going to put that border on the top and the bottom. Which I just pinned this. Oh, you know what? I'm going to take this off because I'm going to show you what I do.
Clip it on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you told me to measure, and I just measured straight down the center. I didn't even realize I'm supposed to take. I was like
there's
so
3
impressed that I
measurements.
measured once.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Well, that's very good. You at
I
least
did measure
measured.
once.
But that's
You
okay.
measured. Yes, it's better than not at all. Because what happens is sometimes if you do not, what happens when you don't square up your blocks?
Oh, well, then it's all off, too.
Yeah.
And then it gets
on
bigger.
the inside.
On the inside, yeah. Because if you get it, if each block is not squared, then your quilt is not going to be where it's supposed to be.
Right. And your seams won't,
Won't
nest.
nest.
Or you look and you got like
Right.
a big pucker in a block because
Oh.
you're trying to nest it and you have a 1/2 inch or
Right.
something that you're
And when you go
Not
to quilt
fitting in.
it, that's, like you said, that's got to go somewhere. So that's where you see people, they'll have pleats in their quilts.
Right.
Which is a
Right.
big no-no.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it doesn't look good.
you can, if it's a baby quilt or something.
Yeah.
And it's for your grandson or granddaughter and you're going to wash it all the time and they're going to
It's
love it,
okay.
then who cares? But
yeah.
you know what? If you want to put it in a quilt,
If you want to, if
In
you
a
want to
show,
show,
I mean.
in a show, the biggest things they look for are your blocks squared, have you lost your points? Your borders are not wavy, and your binding. That's the biggest things for quilt shows. So,
What about, let me ask you a question. What about on a border? Because one lady said, now this is what I've always done. When I have my border,
yes.
like on this one, I was using it for my example, I ran the stitch this way. I just sewed it and got my border. Normally when I do my borders, I do
They
it
don't
at a
care.
45.
They don't care whether it's straight or if it's at an angle. But what they can, and especially with binding, they don't want to see a bunch of bulk. But it doesn't matter if it's a straight stitch or if it's at an angle, or if it's at a 45.
Oh, okay.
Is there one that makes it better looking? Is it easier to work with a straight or a mitered?
45-degree angle.
It
That
depends.
was
It
how I've
depends on
always
too
done
if your borders have prints.
And
yeah, you
matching?
can match up
And
prints
if you
or
can match it up,
or
or
lines.
if it's
like a gingham.
yeah, like
Ooh.
squares or plaids, then you can't really, as long as you match it if it's plaids and stuff. But they really don't care whether it's a straight seam or if it's a 45.
Okay.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay, so
And-
back
and
to
folks,
what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
as we're doing this, if you have questions, I'm watching the comments and I'll let the ladies know what questions there are. So if you have questions, this is your opportunity.
Yes, please ask. Okay, so anyway, so now we're going to measure this in 3 different places. So we're going to put a border on the top and bottom. So I'm going to measure across. First, we're going to measure the top, and this is 26. And then we're going to measure the center. This is 25 3/4. And then we're going to measure the bottom. Right. And this is 25 1/2. So we have a 1/2 inch difference from our bottom
To the top.
to our top. So what's going to happen is we're going to take those 3 numbers, 26 plus 25.75 and 26.5. We're going to add those up and divide by 3. That's going to give us our average. So this comes out, the average is 26.75 or 26 3/4 inches. So we want to cut our border 26 3/4 inches. No matter what this size is, no matter what, if that's bigger or not, you're going to cut it like this. Then your borders are going to be the same size, top and bottom. So what we do once it's cut, so what most people do, let me back up. I totally forgot about the one thing. You can take your border and say it's really, really long, and then you have your border, and you just go like this, and then you sew it down,
And I do that a lot.
and then you whack and
Yes.
whack.
That's what I do.
Stop whacking. Because that is what
That's
gives
you
you
give waves.
waves.
If
Yes.
there's a huge difference, you do get waves.
Yes, and Gail, you said you have really good luck with
I
it.
have good luck, but I have done this for so long.
Yes.
It makes a difference. And I
So-
quilt my own quilts.
So you see it.
I
You
see
know
it. I
what's
know.
going on.
Yeah.
So, but your blocks are squared up. She's
I
taken
do
the
square
time
up
to
I
square it.
square up my blocks.
Yes.
I definitely
And
square my
also,
blocks.
what happens with this is this fabric has been stretched.
Well, you almost have to get it to fit your border.
Yeah. Well,
That-
if you just stack and
it.
whack.
Yeah. That's
Another
true.
term for stack and whack. Stack your fabric and just whack it off. You may stretch this border. You may stretch your blocks.
That's
Sometimes
true.
you'll see,
pull.
right, if you haven't back tack on your seam or done shorter stitches to make sure that seam doesn't come apart, you may stretch it, and then you're going to have an opening where your blocks are together.
Well,
They're not quite together.
you're gonna pull your stitches.
Correct. So that can happen because things stretch. I mean, it's fabric. It stretches. It moves. So anyway, that's how you get a wavy border. So to not get a wavy border, we measure in 3 different spots: the top, the center, and the bottom.
And then take the measurement.
Yes, and then you take, yes.
So Irene B asks, "What's your trick for squaring up your blocks?" Is that for another episode, or is that something?
Yeah, we're going to probably talk about
we
that.
will.
We'll do an episode about that, Miss Irene.
Yes, yes.
Question. So when you cut your borders, because do you cut them the width-wise of your fabric and piece them that way, or do you cut them the lengthwise?
It
Because-
depends. That's
because
a very good
Oh,
question.
I
Because
get
the
it.
lengthwise, there's not as much stretch.
Correct, because you got your,
Your
warp
warp
and
and
your
your
weft. Yes.
So are we talking top to bottom first, and then from the sides first, and then putting the
No, we're talking about
When you cut
actually
your borders,
cutting the fabric off of your yardage
Got it.
for the border.
Oh, okay. Along the
So-
selvage, like parallel to the selvage or perpendicular
Yes.
to selvage.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's called the warp,
Warp
and the
and the
weft of the fabric, and it's how it's made. You know,
Yeah.
it's on these big rollers,
Yeah.
and they have all the cotton,
Yes.
and then they do the back. Like the weaving of the whole fabric and all this.
Okay.
But it stretches more one way than
Than
the
it does
other
the other
way.
way.
Yeah.
So what should we be doing?
To me, it doesn't matter because I measure
She
and I
measures,
put,
yeah.
I cut it. But you do have more stretch one way than you do the other way.
also you're going to use more yardage
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
if you do it. The
But you can make it work for you because I've done this too. I look at my pattern and everything at the very
Right.
beginning, and I see how, like, if I'm doing a 72 by
Right.
65 quilt, and I want it to go like if you have those, what is it, the floral borders and stuff, the pre-printed fabric that's just made just for borders.
okay.
You know.
So you want the okay.
So yeah, there's different things you have to look at. But I'm getting off on this squirrel.
So if you
Anyway.
had to, if you didn't make, so what you're saying is as long as you measure, it's okay which way you cut it.
And you don't stretch it. Try not to
Yeah,
stretch it.
when you're sewing, don't stretch.
Don't pull it.
Yeah.
Don't pull it.
Yeah. So, and this is how we do this to where we don't. Okay, so now I have this measured correctly. And what I do is I put it on
Did you need a sewing
my
machine?
fabric. No.
Okay.
No, because I already got it.
Okay.
Okay, so I take my clips and then I pin on the one side. I make sure that this edge is right here with my fabric, with my blocks, the center of my quilt. Then I come over here, and if this side is shorter or longer, depending, you may have to stretch your fabric out to meet this end, or you may have to pull it in. So this I have, it's bigger because that side was bigger, this was a short side. I'm still gonna take my border and I'm gonna put it right
Better
on this
to the
edge.
edge,
Let me put it right here so you guys can see it better on this pink.
Pink, yeah.
So I have this border right on that edge, and then I'm gonna clip that. So I have both ends clipped. Now, see, there's more extra fabric in there. But the thing is, I have this entire length. This may be like a 1/2 inch of fabric or something that I need to work in.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna just, pucker it somewhere. So you can literally just stretch the
stretch your
fabric
fabric,
out.
yeah.
So I stretch it out, and then I keep it where it's supposed to be. I walk it in with my fingers, and then I will clip that right in the center. Now I have my fabric clipped to the edges where I'm going to begin and end when I sew it. And I also have this fabric that I need to work in here, and this that I'll work in here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I just stretch it right there, and then I clip right in the center of that.
So are you a
And then-
clipper and not a pinner?
It depends on the my one friend goes, she always says depends. It always depends. Depends what I'm working on.
Okay.
Sometimes I do.
And I don't do either.
You just
I just sew.
I
Yes.
know. You stack it and you whack
I
it.
just
No.
stack, and I know.
And see,
So
ladies, and it
it's-
works.
and
So
it
sometimes.
works.
But anyway, what I would do now, here's the next trick. So we're going to use our sewing machines to help us bring in this fullness. And what part of your sewing machine pulls in the fullness? Is your feed dogs.
Is your feed dogs.
Boom. So you don't have to stretch or pull this fabric really unless you have a big gap. So what I would do when I will go to my sewing machine, I'm going to put the fullness down toward my feed dogs. And then once it's under my needle, then I take my clip off. And I only have to match. Don't be pulling this out and because
Just
you're going
sew to the next
defeat
clip.
your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sew to this clip. Whatever's full in this little area needs to stay in this area. So I put it in my machine, I start
it.
sewing until I get right up to this clip, then I take that clip off, then I worry about what's between the next two clips.
I've always found that whatever, if I have something longer, that I put that on the bottom. Wait, whatever I have to, that has
Right,
to.
it has the fullness.
Yeah, so I like that wording
Like
because
g-
I've
like
never.
garments.
So the fullness has to go on the bottom. It makes it
Correct.
easier when the fullness is on the bottom.
Let your machine do the work
Got it.
for you. You
Right.
don't have to do it
Well,
all
and if you've
yourself.
ever sewed garments,
Oh, I know that's what I did.
Yeah.
I don't. No, I'm not doing that anymore.
Fullness.
That's when I got into quilting because it's all straight seams, except for
Yes.
even curves
Curve
are
pieces.
not bad.
no, and
You know.
and this is the same principle with doing curve piecing
Right.
too. Yeah.
Right. But then you had to do all your little snips. Oh. Okay, so here is the piece. Here's my example. Of that. I have another example. So
That's
here.
measured.
Yep, it's measured and put on. I did not cut it when I was done. This is how it is. So it came out really flat. These pieces I cut right on top of each other. The borders I did, and it just turns out flat.
So I have a question for you. When I'm doing my Kimberbell borders, they're puffy, because they have the batting in them. And sometimes, and I love my walking foot, but sometimes it will push that top part down a little bit as I start. So I will start in maybe, a couple stitches and then back stitch and then go. Is that okay? Is that wrong?
Yeah, no, but maybe it's the pressure on your foot. Maybe you need to lighten up the pressure. So that the walking foot, because your walking foot has a belt, right?
I'm using the dual feed,
Right.
the compact dual feed.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what I have too. So the belt will,
Can
you
you
know,
lighten up the pressure?
well, you should be able to, yeah. You got one of the best machines
Yes.
ever.
I
Yes.
guess there.
I used to work with my
Think you can
Destiny,
adjust
and
I'll have to
yeah,
look.
it's in your. it's
So
in
I'll
your thing.
usually
So
so
lighten
it
up your
won't
pressure.
push.
Yeah,
Yes.
let the machine work for you.
Got
That's
it.
what all these tools are for. And that might be another class. I know you guys do a lot of stuff, and Michelle might even teach that. I don't know.
So Irene has another question. Do you sometimes fold your quilt in half and then half again, make a fold, then do the same with your borders and match up those folds to help ease the fabric in?
No, I just do it just how I do it.
I think that
If it's 120 inch long,
Yes.
I lay it out on my table. I clip, and I have it all sitting there on my tables when it goes through. I don't fold it because what happens when you fold it?
Well,
It's gonna.
it will come in.
maybe ripple and
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll shift and adjust. And the thing is, if you have a wavy border and you put another border on
It's
it,
going to get worse.
it gets a little bit worse. And then
Each-
you put another
a
border,
bor- and it's
it
worse,
gets a
yeah.
little bit worse than that. And then I've seen quilts that have had, oh my God, 15, 17 borders, around a panel. And it's really, it's
Well, and then there's really,
it's
I
a
mean,
challenge.
it is a
but
cha-
they look
and-
beautiful when you quilt them. They do.
they do,
Quilting
but
hides a lot.
and long armors no. Use starch and steam to shrink things up, and then. But sometimes I've seen them where you've even had to put in a tuck.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's when I'll call the customer and I'll tell them,
Yeah.
because I had one. It was a Lone Star. It was a great big
Oh,
Lone
because that's all
Star.
bias.
It might have been like a 90 by 90.
Oh, so it's all bias
the
cuts,
center-
so that's why.
The center, I got.
Did it go up?
Oh, I had a point about that high that just came up in the center, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is a challenge. So it came out really nice.
Did you
though.
have to steam it a lot?
I steamed it.
Yeah.
I have my steamer is named Stanley.
Stanley the steamer.
Oh, that's great.
I have a question. So when you're doing the quilt, so let's say that this is your quilt, does it matter if you put on the top part first and is there something that's right or wrong? Should you put the top and the bottom on and then the sides, or because I know it comes back to Kimberbell because that's where I really learned how to do a lot of
Right.
this. They'll do the sides first. So they'll do from here to there and then they put the top on. And I think that's usually how they do them. So does it make a difference?
I don't know. Not if
No.
you're going to do squared borders. Now, if you're going to miter, now that's a
Yeah,
whole nother
miter's
thing.
a whole nother thing, and let me tell you, you don't have to miter.
No.
You don't have to.
Was that a thing? Did people?
No, yes,
Did
and
it
some
used to be
people
a thing?
still. Some people still
Some mitered
think-
borders look beautiful.
Okay.
They
It
do.
depends on the fabric you're using for the border. Too.
Yeah, but for some reason, I find a lot of beginner quilters. They'll come to me and it's their first or second or third quilt or something, and their borders are all mitered, and I don't understand why.
Huh.
And it's hard because
is
mitered
harder.
borders, you need to know how to do them.
Yes, you do.
And that's when I use my pen and I mark, and then I pin it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the thing. So you don't have to have a mitered border, but no, you do not have to either put your top borders on first
or your yeah,
sides.
Doesn't matter.
You could do either. But once you get, say you do your top and bottom border, then you're going to turn your quilt, and then you're going to
measure again.
Right.
Yeah.
Top, middle, bottom. And then you'd put those borders on. And if you have another border, you can start over again.
Measure again.
And then you're going to measure again the part with your border. So you will always be taking fresh measurements.
For each border, right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and they'll be the same. So say we have a 26 and 3/4 inch border on top and bottom, and our sides are say a 30 inch or whatever. It's going to be, your quilt will be square at this point, 25 and 3/4 by 30 inch.
Right.
And whatever happens on the inside, if you have a bunch of blocks and stuff that's on the inside and you got some fullness, don't worry about that, because the quilter, or if you do it yourself,
Right.
you will take that and you will work it in.
It works
It's
in.
you're gonna to square your quilt up is all in those borders.
Absolutely.
Oh, so the borders are like.
It's
It's
that's
probably
it.
the most, and that's one of the main things they look at quilt shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Borders,
need to have them right.
and they really are picky. So if you have let's say you have a 1 inch border, they really want you to make sure you're using your 1/4 inch seam, because there's nothing worse than stitching with wavy borders on a small border. And even with sashing on quilts.
What's the difference between sashing and borders? Is sashing just a thin border?
No.
Oh. So you know how you have the black on there?
Inside the quilt.
This is
That's not, that's
Oh.
really not a border.
But how
This-
about the black
this is like
around
the
it?
sash-
And we're
this is a
talking
border.
about this, how about the black around it though?
This
is that a border?
This is considered a border.
Right. The,
Goes
all the
sash,
way
the
around.
sashing in the center, the
This.
center ones are considered sashing.
Got
Yes.
it.
But
I
there's
did
some
not
quilts
know
with
that.
no borders.
I have quite a few with no borders.
You're
So
gonna
how do you
see
square
like
those up?
that one up there is no borders.
Right.
Can you see that? And these I did no border here.
Right. There's no borders.
No borders on these.
But you got a lot of sashing in that. Well, really, it was
No,
built
it's
into
just
the
all,
blocks.
it's built into the blocks.
Yeah. I didn't even know about borders in the beginning. I just slapped on a binding once I was done.
Which is
I was like, done. Binding.
and look how perfect that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pressing fiend.
Yeah, pressing.
Well, pressing is
a
important.
I'm a
big
pressing
deal.
fiend.
It is important.
Yes.
And that'll
How
be,
does that affect your
Oh,
borders?
it affects it.
It does.
Press, don't iron.
Ah,
Yes, and
I'm an
that's
ironer,
because of the,
actually.
Yeah, well, because it can shift your fabric.
Yeah.
But if you're going to square up your blocks, do what you want.
Yeah.
Because in the end, you're going to be squaring them all up. And I square up as I go.
I do too.
I mean, even if I have say I've got like a cat's cradle block, and you got like a little 4-patch or something, or an hourglass block, I
yeah.
square those up, and then I put my block
Together and then make
square
sure
those.
make sure the block is square.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, Miss Naomi Ray asks, are you pressing before you measure the border?
That is a very good question. Now, because it depends. It depends. Again, it depends. Have you starched it? Because when you starch, what happens, I learned this too the hard way, is because if you starch your fabric and then you iron it and you got those blocks and you're being very careful and then you starch it, that starch is going to be shrinking it up just a little bit. And then we get into a scant 1/4 inch, because you can't use your full 1/4 inch because your blocks are shrinking as you go. But it could be the way you're pressing. If you steam it, we want that nice crisp seam. So what a lot of people do is they will starch all their fabric first, and I've done this and it really works. They'll starch the fabric first, then you cut everything out.
Right.
And as you go, you really don't have to use any more starch because that
No,
fabric's already
it's
starched. You can come in and press.
And just
Then
press.
you really want to press and be careful. And your fabric should not
Shrink. No.
up as much.
And use a clapper. Oh my gosh!
yeah, the wooden
big
clappers,
the big
yeah.
clapper that I got from you, Jeannie.
Yes.
What is it, like an
love
8x8 or 9x9?
No, it's
It is
12.
a big block.
Really?
One. We
Block.
have
It-
some clappers here,
Yeah.
so you can.
But the
there's
big
like a
block
little
one is amazing.
And let me grab that other one.
And what
Yeah.
those
And-
do, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, it will it puts weight on the seam, but it
Right.
also it pulls
pulls
up the
the heat,
moisture
yeah,
and the heat out
Yeah.
of that fabric, and then you can take this off, and your seam is like
Perfect.
it's really
perfect.
good.
Yeah.
So
this is the best
Yeah,
thing.
so
Here
the
is
bigger
the mother
ones-
of all
This-
clappers.
Yeah,
This is the best
it's
thing
nice
ever.
because it's heavy.
It is heavy.
And the
it-
weight
yeah.
helps. It's like putting a book on, something to straighten
Right.
it out,
Right.
or something.
Do you clapper your seams on your board? I clapper every
Everything.
seam.
I don't,
Okay.
I do.
but
See,
depends.
and there's
And-
there's no wrong or right way.
no.
It's just
So-
what works. For
Yeah,
you.
I have one just like this, but it's bigger than this,
Yeah.
and it's sitting right on my ironing table. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I clapper everything when I'm piecing,
if I want it super
want-
precise, and I know I'm
I
gonna have it
agree.
in a show or something.
and I beat that seam sometimes. I beat it.
Why?
Because I get, when you're bringing everything together and there's like the
You
bulky.
need to
You
twirl it.
You need
Ah,
nesting. See,
I
that'll be
need
another
you to
book.
Yeah, the
teach
nesting and the
me.
twirl.
Oh, it's called nesting and twirling when you.
Yeah.
So when
'cause
it
you're
all
gonna-
comes together, sometimes I have like a little volcano. I beat it.
Yeah. Those are hard to long arm over
All
too
those-
sometimes.
Do you
Yes.
lose
I mean, the
needles to
machine
that?
goes it. Yeah, well, it can throw the timing out.
So Jermaine asked, do you use a dry or a steam iron?
I only use a dry iron.
I use a dry.
Yeah, I only use a dry, but it kind of becomes steam because I use Best Press.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I do my fabric before I
Yes.
cut it, and then I don't use Best
You
Press
don't use
anymore.
any the rest of the way.
Nope.
Because I will still Best Press because I want it to be, I'm aggressive.
Well, I'm spoiled too. I have my ironing table is one of those. It's a stainless steel table. We got it like at an auction, and it used to be used in food service.
Yeah.
Just one of those stainless steel tables. Well, what stainless steel does the same thing like what a wool mat will do. You put your piece down on there, and I have a piece of batting and then some flannel over it, and that's my ironing.
That's your
Wow.
ironing table. Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
So the heat comes right back
Yes.
up on it. That's what a wool mat does. So that's what I do.
well,
and-
that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
so
have the
the
big
heat-
wool mat.
Yeah, and the heat comes right back up.
Yes.
So when I go to retreats and stuff, I always take my wool mats because
Right.
I want my pressing to be what I'm used to.
So Cindy Lehman asks, does Best Press count as starch?
Yes.
Yes, Best Press is a synthetic starch. So that's like if you go to the store and you get a starch,
Like Niagara. or
Niagara
whatever.
stuff, those are organic. So bugs like organic; they can eat that stuff.
So you don't want to use that.
You can totally use that if you're gonna wash your quilts. But if you're gonna have a quilt that you're not gonna wash for a while, you probably want to use like Best Press.
I did not know that.
And
I
I
did
always-
not know there was an organic and a synthetic.
Yeah, Best Press is synthetic,
Okay.
and like Flatter and all that. Those are all synthetics.
Okay.
And then I always get mine 50-50 water and Best Press. Works perfect.
Really?
Oh,
so
you
is
dilute
that
yours?
what
Yeah.
See,
you
now-
recommend? You do half and half.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes it go farther and.
Oh, see, I've not
And it-
diluted mine.
Yeah, I never have any issues whatsoever.
Yeah, I've always
Now
just
I'll
used
dilute Terrial
full
Magic if I
strength.
really want something stiff.
Oh, that's-
Terrial Magic. I'll
yeah.
dilute, but not Best.
Yeah, that's really stiff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Any other questions, folks? Border questions? Clapper questions? Well, then maybe that'll be it for today. I mean, sometimes they may go a little bit longer. Sometimes they may be a little bit shorter. But today was our first installation. And because it's such a cornerstone of your quilt, and I think, like I said, Michelle sees it all. So
She does see it.
this goes out to you that are bringing your quilts to Michelle. You better measure
No,
3
I love
spots.
all the beautiful quilts.
Yeah.
You know what? The borders, yes, they can be, but I love what I do, and it's like Christmas. Every time I go to the next quilt, I'm like, I get to open and see all that beautiful.
Yeah.
There's so much talent in Reno.
There is a lot of talent here.
These people are just amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and we put together a list of things that we're going to cover. So I'm going to go over it with the ladies, and we'll have an announcement for you about the next one that we're going to be doing. But thank you so much for joining us.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a way that if people watch this later and ask questions, can we maybe start the next one with the question and answer on the previous?
Yeah.
Sure, that's great.
So maybe, so if you have questions and you're not getting them answered because maybe you watch this later, we'll go through this prior to the next installation, the next episode, and we'll answer those questions beforehand.
Perfect.
And then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the next. We'll go on and move on to the next topic. But thank you, Michelle and Gail, for joining us today. That was so exciting.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to be doing this once a month. So we will see you about this time in October.
Yes.
Sounds good.